any of you. If you just kind of give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, So great, excellent. All right, wonderful. Well, I'm Bob Nemick, Senior Associate with Griffin-Hammis, and I can see from some of the names here, and some of the faces that I recognize. It's good to see you. So the Friday conversations have been something that we've been doing sort of monthly about items, issues, topics that have some for which the pandemic has really sort of changed the world for us. And again, once again, please mute your microphones, okay? I'm getting like some really a lot of ambient noise, and it's loud. So I appreciate that. Anyway, and so I know Steve one about providing consultative employment supports, and I can't remember what might have been Nancy who did one on doing virtual informational interviews and home visits and those types of things. So the reality is that for the most part, life for the last 9 months has been altered dramatically. Whether it's staying home or affecting employment or family gatherings or hair, as in my case. We've all experienced this, and one of the things at Griffin-Hammis that we've been doing since probably March, maybe April, is we've changed all of our ACRE training is now all been online virtual, which has been a really interesting thing for instructors, to be able to, to not have that human contact, where you watch people's faces and you watch their body language, and you kind of get a sense of what they're getting and how they're getting it. And it's really hard to do that in virtually. So let's just go with that. So anyway, so today we're going to talk about systematic instruction. And so Dallas, if you advance it one, please. So it's a conversation, that to try to, it's not like like a huge presentation, I have some thoughts about it. And so our time is limited. And what I'd like to focus on are a couple of things. I think regardless of whether you're doing training instruction in person, or whether you're having to do it virtually or modified some way, the first thing you have to know is what you have to teach, right? And then secondly, you need to know how to teach it. We're going to talk a little bit about the fact that there are some different types of instruction or types of learning objectives, and they each have unique methods that are designed really to promote that kind of learning. So knowing how to teach is important, because that's also going to tell you methodologies, going to talk about location, like we were talking about here, knowing where the learning should take place. You need to know who needs to teach. We'll talk a little bit about what I call the fallacy of job coaching. And just for those of you who don't know me, I've been at this for kind of a long time. And actually, I celebrated my 40th anniversary in the field this fall. So a lot of perspective about instruction of people who have a hard time learning, and where the best places to teach are, and who the best people are to teach it. So I'll share some of that. And then we need to know how to support businesses, how to support natural trainers, and most importantly, how you're going to support the learners. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to, for some questions. So if you go one more, Dallas. Okay, so words of the wise. One more click. The best teaching and support strategies implemented by the highest skilled job coaches in the world will not be enough to overcome a poor job match. And you can click it one more time. And that's for anyone. Okay, so we're basically saying that so often, you know, and here's the beauty of customized employment, right? So customized employment doesn't seek to find people available positions and plug them into those available positions. It's really looking to find places starting from the perspective of the job seeker or the learner, if you will, and finding the places where that makes sense for that person, because that's going to be like the number one critical factor in success, is whether or not the person who is doing it wants to do it, right? Or the person who has to learn something wants to learn it. If you know, and we've all been there, right? Whether it's been in school or whether it's been in jobs you've had or different things. You know, if you're in a situation that you don't really want to be in, it's hard to pick up what you need to do. And so one of the key principal elements of systematic instruction is teaching people things that they find interesting or valuable. Okay, interesting or valuable, and those provide the motivation. So again, by using customized approaches, we're finding out about what people's interests are, what their skill sets are, what their conditions of employment importantly are, and looking for those places where that makes some sense, where they're going to kind of fit in because they have that mutual interest and that mutual skill set, or they're interested in acquiring a skill set that's going to be useful in that setting. That's the most important thing. So if you're just, you know, looking in the want ads, I guess there still are want ads, but if you're just randomly cold calling, if you're randomly doing labor market job development, then job coaching becomes an afterthought, right? On-the-job support becomes an afterthought, as opposed to a forethought, which we're trying to get to. And so when you're doing discovery, what discovery is trying to help us do is to learn who the job seeker is, who the learner is, and a lot of different aspects of his or her life. But one critical aspect is, you know, how they learn. You know, what are the best ways for somebody to learn, and do they tend to gravitate towards types of learning, types of things that require specific kinds of learning approaches. So that's why discovery, that's why the customized approach is so important, and makes the most sense to me. You can go one more then, please. Okay, so what to teach? I know some of you have been in courses that I have taught, and we've gone through systematic instruction. So some of this will be a refresher to you, but I think it's really important to go over that ground again. There are 3 types of learning objectives. There are only 3 types of learning objectives. All right, one of them, and they're not in a hierarchy. You know, it doesn't say here like, you know, one of these is more important than the other. They are equally important. They're just 3 different kinds. Okay, so the first kind I'm going to talk about is called cognitive, and the outcome of a cognitive objective is knowledge. So I give you a couple of examples like reading or math. Those are cognitive tasks, right? So cognitive types of learning objectives are going to involve your brain, right? It's going to involve knowledge, and there are typical methods that you teach that, right? If you want a real lesson in how to teach cognitive objectives, watch Sesame Street, because they became the masters at that kind of thing, using different kind of devices and methods to do it. So why I'm telling you this is because, you know, if you're going to be doing instruction, you know, that if you're able to categorize the kind of learning that is involved with that particular type of instruction, it's going to make your job easier, and it's going to make it easier on the learner to grasp the, you know, what it is that you're trying to teach, or what he or she really wants to learn. So cognitive knowledge, right? Language, math, recognition. Then you have the psychomotor. And psychomotor involves these, right? It involves your hands. It involves doing something, right? It almost always involves the hands. In some cases, you could say that if somebody has a prosthetic or something like that, or some sort of an assistive device that is a facsimile, that could be a psychomotor objective as well. Okay, so an example might be loading paper in a copy machine. That's going to involve your hands. You got to open the drawer or whatever, and you got to put the paper in, and you have things that you have to do with your hands. A lot of cooking involves your hands. Okay, now when we do try and divide, come up with themes and vocational themes, one of the areas that we are looking at are what skills do people have, and we'd like to divide them into two categories of skills: the knowing skills and the doing skills, right? So the cognitive skills are going to be in the knowing skills. So if somebody said, I can speak French, that would be a cognitive skill, right? It's a knowledge-based skill. Or I can do algebra. That's a cognitive skill that somebody has. If somebody said, I know how to change an oil filter on a car, that's a psychomotor skill, right? Because you have to use your hands to do that. And so a lot of times people get confused because they go, well, don't you have to know too? Well, yeah, that's the psycho part of psychomotor, right? So, but the real action involves using your hands. Could involve using your feet too, right? If you're driving a car with a stick shift, right, and you have to use both your feet to use the clutch and use the gas pedal and all that. That's psychomotor as well. But typically it's going to involve your hands. And then the third kind that we talk about is affective cognitive. And this is the trickiest one because affective cognitive is about behavior or values or beliefs. Something like saying that somebody needs to be more dependable or more punctual or friendlier or something, stuff like that. And those are the hardest ones to teach. So if you think about these three, and again, they're not hierarchical, they're just three different kinds of things. The easiest ones actually to teach are psychomotor. And one of the reasons for that is because the completion of a psychomotor task gives you something, right? If I'm scrambling eggs, when I'm done with that, I have scrambled eggs. If you were to load copy paper, right? There's a distinct end to it, and whether you succeeded or not because the paper came through the copy machine, right? So there's an empirical result that you're going to see. Cognitives are again, they're not as difficult as affective cognitive, but they're, pardon me, a little bit more difficult to teach than psychomotor because they're all up here, they're all in the ether, right, in your brain and all that. So those three things. So what's important is whether you are doing instruction virtually or whether you're providing on-the-job support training, person to person like that. Knowing which kind of objectives these are really important because it will change how you approach what you're doing. And so we'll talk a little bit about them. So go ahead, Dallas, if you would, please. So all these learning objectives, whether on or off the job, will fall into one of these three categories. So one more time, please. Okay, so each type of objective has specific methods for teaching it. They're specific. So let's go with cognitive first, right? The most common ways, well, first of all, the overall objective, the overall approach to cognitive objectives is presentation followed by recitation, right? I present something to you, I might say, this is a pocket knife, and then say, Lori, hi Lori, by the way, Lori, what is this? And Lori says, it's a pocket knife. And I go, oh, there, great, we did it, right? So that's how it goes. So if you think about flashcards, I don't know if there's, it's been a while since my kids were in grammar school and learning how to read and all that kind of thing. But but in my growing up, we had flashcards with letters on them, and again, going back to Sesame Street, right? Sesame Street would use today's program is brought to you by the letter A, and then they would show you pictures of apples and other things that began with the letter A, or they'd come up with a little song about the letter A, and which is a mnemonic device, a song or a riddle or something like that, something that cues the person into remembering what it is. Pictures, if you were teaching somebody, if somebody had to, let's say an objective that they had or something that would help them in their work would be to know the names of their coworkers, right? Know the names of their coworkers. How would you do that? Well, you could use flash pictures. And the cool thing is that, that's easier to do now than it was. I mean, some of you are back in the day, remember that we used to do these with Polaroid camera pictures and with hole punches and make little ring books with things like that. And Polaroid film was expensive and it was a pretty labor intensive task. Well now, because your phone is your friend and you have a camera, you can take all kinds of pictures, and you can create a pictorial assist. The things that instructors use to help teach people are called assists. And so you can have a pictorial assist now and put it together either on like a slideshow or print them out and make a little booklet or whatever, but it's easier to do. So cognitive objectives. So again, remembering that it's a presentation. Here's what this is, and then you're expecting a reply from the learner. What is that? And again, always customizing it to the learning style and the communication style of the learner. All right. So if you're dealing with somebody who's not a verbal communicator, right, you're going to have to modify it somehow. Okay. And if so there might be if somebody's using a assistive device to talk, or they can point to something or something like that. You can use that kind of a like point to Mary or point to Jim, that kind of thing. The most common and useful tool in the world of psychomotor objectives is something called a task analysis. And a task analysis is simply breaking down an activity into what Mark Gold would call teachable components. And a teachable component is the right amount of information to elicit the correct response. That's it, right? And so that's the answer in the age-old question of how detailed do you make a task analysis? And the answer is it depends. And it depends on, and what is it going to depend on? It depends on the response of the learner. Okay, so if I do something and I'm not getting the correct response, and that's happening over and over again, then I have to change it, right? And so one of the overall attitudes about instruction, systematic instruction, is my colleague Beth Keaton, who when we're doing the online courses now, we've broken them up into teaching in teams of 2, and so I think we have six sections that we teach, and there are 6 different teams of us that are teaching those. And Beth and I do systematic instruction because we both are real passionate about systematic instruction. And one of the things that Beth said is when she was in graduate school and she was in education classes, that the instructor said to them, "I want you to get this in your head right away, right now." And the instructor hammered away at it over and over again, is that everything is your fault. Right? Just got to assume that everything is your fault. And so if the learner is not getting it, it's your fault, right? And that's sort of dramatic. I prefer a little bit softer approach to that, saying if it's not working, change it, right? Do something different. Don't get so married to a method that you can't change, right? Have a saying that we actually have up on our refrigerator in the one of the magnet things, and it says nothing changes if nothing changes. Okay, so you really have to be willing to modify and try something different, right? And in fact, Mark Gold's methodology for systematic instruction, he's often considered to be the father of systematic instruction, was the try another way method. Okay, so again, with cognitive, it's presentation followed by recitation. With psychomotor, it's about repetition and modification, right? I mean, many of you have probably written goals and objectives for people, and or written profiles of individuals where you might say, you know, Martha needs to do repetitive tasks. Well, maybe, but here's the deal. The only way you learn how to do a psychomotor task is by repeating it. How many times? Enough, right? Enough times. If, you know, here in Minnesota, and I don't know how many of you are from Minnesota. I know some of you are because I know some of you, but here in Minnesota, the day programs are licensed as something called a day training and habilitation service, right? DTNH, day training and habilitation service, and there are such types of programs all throughout the United States, and right now working on some training that we're going to be providing to Singapore, and they've got them there. You know, they got one there. So they're all over the place. And the average amount of time that somebody in the United States, that an individual in the United States with a disability would spend in a day program is 30 years. Okay, that's dropping a little bit because, you know, more people have gone into community-based services and community employment, but it's still, you know, right around 30 years. So here's what I believe. If I'm running a training program and I got a person in there who's been in there for 30 years, I ain't any good at training. Okay, you know, so I've got to be changing all the time, modifying my methods, and the cool thing is that, you know, the digital world that we are living in sometimes drives everybody just wacky. You know, I know for me it does, and all. But there's some real benefits to it, right? I mean, in terms of instantaneous information and people sharing discoveries and sharing new techniques, and you can get them instantly. Whereas 30 years ago, you had to read it in a journal. And by the time it got into the journal as an article and went through all of the editorial reviews and such and all that have to happen, it was already yesterday's news, right? So now you kind of get information right at your fingertips. You know, you use the Googleator and you find all kinds of stuff that you didn't know about. So we have more tools in our disposal. So repetition and modification, repetition and modification. And if the person's not getting it, change it. The person's not getting it, change something, right? And always start changing some things. And just don't, you know, go blowing things up. Just, you know, strategically change something, see if it works. So it might take some time, but it is that repetition. And you know that somebody is acquiring psychomotor skill when they exhibit something called habit. You know, and so think about it this way: when you're first learning, any of us, when we're first learning how to do something that involves using our hands, or even thinking about typing, right? You're looking at it, right? You look, so you're engaging more than one of your senses. It might be, you know, hearing, it might be vision, it might be feel, whatever, but you're using more than one of your senses as for feedback in terms of this. And what you'll see when somebody achieves habit is they don't do that any longer, right? So so typing. If you ever remember, man, typing. I remember typing class, you know, as a freshman in high school, learning how to type on a typewriter, and then, you know, looking everywhere, or hunt and peck and that kind of thing. And then after enough practice, enough repetition, you weren't doing it anymore, right? You weren't looking at it anymore. They try to teach you to not look at it. So that's kind of the measure of success is habit. Then the last one being affective cognitive. What's critical about this is there has to be agreement between a learner and an instructor. So if the learner doesn't want to learn it, you know, I don't care what you do. You're not going to. You might resort to bribery. You might resort to anything like this, coercion. But if that learner doesn't want to learn it, it ain't going to happen. All right. So it's really important to have a why. The why has got to be right there. So if somebody is just habitually late, let's say, you've got to figure out why they're habitually late. You know, and is it because they don't want to be there? Is it just because they don't know how to tell time? Is it because they stay up too late at night? Whatever it is, you've got to figure out the why. And then you have to understand that the goal has to be something that is valuable to the learner. You know, if it's not, you're going to have a heck of a time, right? Oftentimes in effective cognitive types of objectives, you might use a list of do's and don'ts. And that list of do's and don'ts is going to be something that's going to be created by the instructor and the learner. You know, you have to have mutual understanding, mutual definition of the do's and the don'ts. Now, here's one of the real things that you have to be careful about. And that is that so many times, even though I mentioned that these are not hierarchical, that effective cognitive one jumps to the forefront so often, where people will say, well, you know, Tom can't get a job until he takes care of this behavior. When I was at community involvement programs, we had a fellow who never took a bath, never wanted to shave or get a haircut or change his clothes or anything like this kind of stuff, right? And he had been on he lived in a group home, and he had been on a hygiene program for like 8 years. Right, and nothing seemed to work for this guy. So what happened was when we started to adopt customized employment, and instead of saying, well, we need to make him change, right, and be more hygienically, you know, satisfactory, they found him a job where he didn't have to get clean. You know, I mean, I grew up outside of Chicago, and when I got out of high school, every year when I was in college, I worked at a cement factory, but it was nasty, dirty, scuzzy man kind of work, you know, and nobody was polite. Nobody was, I mean, a lot of those guys, I don't think they ever changed their clothes, and you know, it's just the way it was. So we have to remember that in the world of employment, that work environments and work settings are as diverse as people, and that we can't continually try to get job seekers into jobs where they have to look good, smell good, sound good, say all the right things, right? Yeah, for some places that's important, but it wasn't important at Federal Cement. It wasn't important at Inland Steel. I can tell you that, okay? So again, be careful about the affective cognitive, making it a pass-through for the other things, okay? It shouldn't be, okay? Because behavior is contextual, and we all know that. Okay, Dallas, if you get the next one, please. So one of the things you have to understand is that if you mix types of objectives and methods, it's a recipe for failure. Okay. So one of the things that if you learn about like a try another way method, Mark Gold's try another way method, and systematic instruction, it is essentially particularly for the psychomotor world, nonverbal. Specifically, you don't say much at all in that. It's different in the world of cognitive objectives, right? Where I might say, what's this? And then you reply, or tell me this, and what's reply. In the world of psychomotor, I'm a lot. And so if I'm teaching a psychomotor task and I'm talking too much, you know, I'm using a cognitive approach to the psychomotor task, I'm probably going to delay or doom acquisition of the skill. Because it's mixing. If it's important to identify things or talk about things, do it different. Do it as a separate thing, not mixing them up together. Okay, one more, please. Okay, so a couple of things. Effective systematic instruction requires planning. You got to do it in advance of beginning a job. In other words, day one is not day one. Okay, and again, if you've gone through any of the customized employment training that we do at Griffin-Hammis Associates, there are others, Mark Golden Associates, takes a similar kind of an approach, and as do I'm sure some others. But the whole deal is like we have a tool that we share with people as we're training them. It's called the it was called the job analysis record, but we've renamed it to be the consultative employment support plan, because we're trying to take the onus off of us or the job coaches or on the job support people being the primary source of instruction, and just flipping that to becoming support to the primary instructors. So that guy that I was talking about that didn't want to take showers and stuff and whatever, he wound up getting a job at a company that's since kind of gone out of business, but at the time they were making replica swords and armor and stuff like that, and so there was these 5 guys that were blacksmiths that had this business where they were doing it. And I know one of their customers was the Smithsonian Institution, where they were making replica things, and they did a lot of sold a lot of things to reenactors, Renaissance festivals and things like that. And anyway, so it was, it was about blacksmithing and working with metal and working with heat and all that kind of stuff. We didn't have anybody that knew anything about that, right? We had no idea what that was going to be like. But we knew that the guy that we were supporting, and we knew he had some specific kind of learning idiosyncrasies, if you will, right? Things that were particular to how he grabbed information and what kind of information he grabbed. So by going in, the natural trainers for him were going to be the guys that worked there. They knew the work, they knew how to do the work, and they knew what not to do, right? My father was a mechanic, and I can't tell you how many times when I would be working with him on one of my cars, and he'd say, don't do it that way. You got to do it this way, and whatever, just sort of show you the subtleties of doing a particular kind of job. So to take a consultative support plan and to negotiate with the business, the employing business, and saying, hey, look, can we take a look at this stuff, and I can write some of this stuff down so I can, because and we like to we can help you kind of get this information to him and in a way that he's really going to understand, because then he's going to be much more productive sooner and all that. So that's, again, being able to go in there. And this was it was almost 10 years ago that happened. And when I think about even how different 10 years ago was, just in terms of the technology. I mean, 10 years ago, I had a BlackBerry, and I thought that was the coolest thing I ever saw was a BlackBerry. And now that seems like I'd be carrying a typewriter around in my pocket. It's like, whatever. But and so we have increased our access and volume of information. Maybe in some instances it's probably made you crazy, that it's it's too much information. But nevertheless, day one is not day one. So planning in advance, so that now I had another situation where somebody that we were working with, this guy, this young guy, fresh out of high school, and went over to a Walgreens that lived over by his house, and kind of on his own got a job, right? And so he was going to start working, and so the employment specialist, she didn't want to interrupt that flow, so she had to figure out a way to do a job analysis record, or at that time was what we called it, a job analysis record for this guy without bringing undue attention to him, without making him seem like he had this third leg or something, right? Which oftentimes, if you're job coaching, you might have felt like that. And so what she did, which I thought was remarkable, was say, like, if she was following this guy around or sort of poking around him with a notepad or a clipboard or whatever it was and writing stuff down, it's going to draw attention to him, right? So, but what she figured out was that nobody was going to think her, it was weird to see somebody on their phone talking. And what she was doing was recording messages for herself on the phone, or texting things to herself, to her computer or whatever, sending emails, about things, so that when she could get back to the office, she could type all that stuff up and create an employment plan. But so, I know sometimes we feel desperate that we have to get that person right into work and start right away, but without some planning, without some forethought, it's going to make it much harder for everybody, to do, particularly if you're dealing with somebody who has difficulties learning, quickly. That's something you really want to be paying attention to. Okay, one more, please. Okay, so where to teach? Well, this has changed, right? I mean, this is one of these areas that has been really affected, because the best learning is going to occur when it takes place in the setting where the knowledge, skill, or behavior typically takes place, right? So if I wanted to learn how to, let's say, bake a pie, right? Well, that's not a good one. How about, make a sword, right? Let's just say if I wanted to learn how to make a sword, right? Where's the best place for me to learn how to make a sword? At a place that makes swords, right? That kind of thing. Where's the best place for me to learn how to fix a car or some aspect of a car is going to be where that's typically done. One of the things that we learned about many people with intellectual disabilities, cognitive intellectual disabilities, is that without saying it's a universal thing, generally many people have difficulty generalizing, right? And what does generalization mean? Generalization is the performance of a task or a skill in a setting other than the one in which the original learning took place. Okay, so and generalization has three components. It has materials, it has people, and it has settings, right? So those three things are really kind of critical. And so let's talk about that. So let's say, for instance, somebody had a job as a let's go back to the day when we used to do a lot of hotel cleaning. Okay, so I'm not saying we want to do that, but one of the things that happened frequently was, people used a vacuum cleaner, right? So they knew how to use a vacuum cleaner. Well, we would get students who came out of transition programs who were in some sort of custodial thing that used a vacuum cleaner at school, as part of their learning piece. And then they would come to the program and maybe go to work in a hotel or whatever and look at the vacuum cleaner and not be able to operate it at all, right? And it was because it was different. It was different than the one that they learned on. When I, way back in the day, I worked at a school for people with disabilities in southeastern Alabama, and we had one of my coworkers used to teach a class in cooking, and so the people that were in that cooking class, this is how long ago that was, would like make muffins, and they'd come around, everybody would buy them and all that kind of thing. Well, Jennifer would take people to the local grocery store to buy the materials, that the ingredients and all that kind of stuff, and so he had this one young guy named Jay who he was like 17 or something like that, and anyway he was really good at the muffins things, right? He'd go to the store with them, and he just knew exactly where to go and what materials he needed. And then when they got to the back to the school, you know, into the kitchen there. He knew exactly how to do all the things that he knew how to do. And of course, Jennifer, instructor, you know, would wrote all that stuff down. And so Jay's mother got, you know, the report about Jay making muffins and all this. And she's thinking, oh my gosh, you know, if Jay can make muffins, this is wonderful, because if he can make muffins, maybe he can move out someday, right? I mean, it's sort of like the parents' dream, all of us, their kids are going to move out. And anyway, so they lived in a different part of the town, different town, and she used to go buy her groceries at a different store. So they went to the store, and he didn't know how to do any of this stuff because it was a different setting, right? When she got back to, so now she's getting skeptical. When she gets back to their home at the school, the stove was gas. At her house, it was an electric, right? So he didn't even know that was a stove, because of, again, it was generalization issues. Think about cars, for instance. You know, one of the you know, I'm mostly retired, so I'm not on the road anymore, thank goodness. I spent a lot of time on the road in hotels and airplanes and rental cars and all those kinds of things. And, you know, from different cars to makers to car years to car things, whatever, there, you know, the dashboard's different, the instrument panel is different, the how you know, keys are different. I mean, all those sorts of things. But what I have learned is that a key is a key is a key, and they may look different, but they do the same thing. And so you're going to have to remember that for some people, a key only looks like this one thing, and it's going to be hard. You know, you have to plan for the generalization to say, well, this is a key, but this is also a key, right? And they do the same thing, but they do them differently, and that's going to take, again, day one's not day one. During the pandemic, we're going to have a lot of different modifications, because you're going to have perhaps simulations, and you might use video and smart technology. I don't know if y'all are familiar with WISE, the Washington Initiative on Supported Employment, but check them out. So their website is www.gowise. I believe it's .org, but it could be .com. I can't recall. And they've done an awful lot of work with Microsoft and Apple, and in using smart technology as instructional assists, to be able to have a phone that where you can play video, or you can play video on a watch, those kinds of things. If you're going to use simulations or video or those kinds of things, you're probably going to have some buy-in from the employing business. And so what that means is that job development and negotiation are critical. They are so we know so much about how a job was developed, what was said, all of those sorts of things have a profound effect on long-term success. So that's, you know, spending time developing your negotiation skills and understanding that is time well spent. Okay, Dallas. So who should teach, right? This is what I call about the fallacy of job coaching. You cannot, I don't care who you are, you can't teach something you've never done yourself. You can't do it, right? And not only that, but the best teachers is going to be the person who knows how to do it, right? And they've been doing it for a while. And you know, when I first learned about how to do time studies, you know, back when in the sheltered workshop days, mea culpa, you know, but I remember you know, talking to the guy that taught me, and he was an industrial engineer, and he was talking about setting performance standards in industry, you know, in regular industry, and he said, I wouldn't even begin to study somebody who hasn't done the job for several weeks, if not months, because what happens is that when you are a customer, you don't do what you don't need to do, right? You know, and so all of us, a couple of things are going to be true about learning. When you are first learning how to do something, it's going to take you longer than when you learn how to do it, okay? For a couple of reasons. And that is that between each of the steps that you're doing, you have to think about it. And even though the thinking could be fractional, I mean, just hardly any time whatsoever, it's still over the course of a lot of time or a lot of trials is gonna add up. So that's one thing. So if I don't know how to do it, I'm probably if I'm learning it too and trying to do it, I am not skilled at it. I am not accustomed to doing it. I'm going to do stuff that doesn't need to be done. All right, I'm going to do stuff that doesn't need to be done. So somebody who's accustomed to doing it, who's been doing it for a long time, skilled at doing it, is the person that you really want to be the model, the teacher. However, skill at doing doesn't always translate into skill as a teacher. All right. Have you ever had a friend or somebody that you knew that was really good at doing something, and you asked him or her, well, why'd you do it that way? How'd you do that? And they'll say, I don't know, I just did it. It just sort of came natural to me. I just did it, that kind of thing. You get that a lot with people who ordinarily do it, carpenters or other skilled tradespeople. They just do stuff. Bakers, they just, they've learned it over time. So it's hard for them to translate the component pieces or transfer the component pieces or communicate the component pieces to somebody else. They're so far removed from it unless part of their job that they do is as an instructor. Okay. Other thing about skilled practitioners is that they'll oftentimes overlook the complexity of steps. So again, one of your tools, one of your best tools is going to be video. Video is really, critical because one of the things that happens. So let me give you an example. Use this a lot in training, and I talk about being in my car at a traffic light, right? And the light's red, and I'm stopped at the intersection, and the light turns green, and that's my cue to do what? And people would say, go. Well, yep, but how many steps are involved with going, right? I mean, because I'm an experienced driver. I've been driving since I was 14, so I know how to make it go. I know the pieces to make something go. But if you've never done that, and somebody says, "Okay, go," what do you do? How are you going to do that, right? And so for any of us, the more familiar we are with a task, the more we have to pay attention to not combining steps into one step, right? It could be something like turn on the gas, right? Turn on the gas on the stove. And it seems like a real simple thing to do, but how many steps are there involved, and feedback cues are there involved with turning on gas on the stove? Or someone says, like say if your household chore, that one of my household chores, is cleaning the bathroom, and so I said, well, clean the toilet. Okay, how many steps are there involved to doing that? How many tools or how many component pieces are there involved to doing that? But yet, and I'm guilty of it because I can, remember telling my kids, okay, it's your task, go clean the bathroom. Boom, right? And then expect them to kind of figure it out. So again, skilled practitioners often overlook complexity. So what we're saying is to practice a consultative approach, as opposed, we used to say to people, as a sales thing in the world of supported employment, we would say at various places where I worked, we'll have a job coach there and we'll get it done. That is not a consultative approach, right? That is an artificial approach. And so what we want to do is we want to assist the natural trainer or the natural practitioner. We want to assist them. We want to observe them doing the task. We may introduce instructional assists, different ways to approach that, act as a support to the natural trainer. You might, for instance, somebody could be a skilled trainer and have never trained somebody who was deaf, right? How would you do that, right? What do you need to know? What are sort of the issues there that you have to pay attention to? One of the things about this, February, I'm going to be doing one of these a Zoom training to people in Singapore. I don't even, I'm just trying to think about what do I need to know? What do I need to not say? What do I need to do? And so not just fortunately, Singapore used to be a British colony, so English is spoken there. One of the three main languages there. So most of the people are going to speak English, but I got to avoid idioms and crazy, stupid jokes that I make and stuff like that, and just kind of, do this. But so what I've been trying to do is watch videos of Singapore, get a sense of the culture, get a sense of the city, get a sense of what's important to people, so that I can provide assists, that I can do things that are contextual and they make sense. And that's about, again, negotiating and advocating. And so be using your power carefully. Don't overuse power, and use it very carefully, and offer suggestions. Could I suggest something? Would you like to? Those kinds of things, as opposed to jumping in and being, declarative. Don't make declarative statements. Make questions. Okay. Consultative employment support in business, it really sets the stage. It's the stage is set during job development. Okay, and again, this highlights the fact that customized employment is an integrated set of tools, that you can't just pull one thing out. Like people will say, we want to just learn discovery, and then we're going to go ahead and do regular job development. There's no point in doing discovery if you're going to do regular job development, because discovery really dictates how you connect with businesses. And same thing with on-the-job supports. Those are really identified, many of them, during discovery. So they're integrated. You just can't pluck one out. And you really want to think about the long-term versus immediate. And that's part of the negotiation too, that for a business to hire somebody, and they're expecting them to be there, right? For some amount of time, and be productive. So that's all about the negotiation and being really good about the negotiation. From the natural trainer standpoint, explain your role. Talk about what it is that you do and how you do it. And again, like I said, it starts from job development and how people are described, how your company is described, how your role is described. Those kinds of things are really critical. Observe natural trainer, ask questions, write stuff down. Okay, writing things down, cannot stress how important it is to write things down. When necessary, model instructional methods, right? And if you are required to substitute for the natural trainer, do it carefully and get in and out, right? And we talk about don't disrupt the ecosystem of the host company. So sort of describe like what happens in the flow and the culture of a company as an ecosystem. And so don't disrupt it. Think about yourself as no impact camping kinds of things. Next one, please. From the learner and new employee standpoint, you want to be careful about, really advocate for using systematic instruction. versus charismatic instruction. And what I mean by charismatic instruction is this idea of do it for me, right? Making my attention as the instructor or my approval as the instructor the reward for doing something well. We've got to stay out of that, right? Got to stay out of that. And the reward needs to be the acquisition of the skill, and that reward's got to be self-generating reward by the individual. The more that a learner becomes dependent on cueing, the harder it's going to be to get out. All right. And we don't have time to get into talking about the hierarchy of cueing or try another way methodology, but look those up. Okay. And if you are going to be in any one of our upcoming online classes, and we have one that's going to start in January, we cover these things. Make sure that the learner gets the power, right? Give the power to the learner. That's the big deal. Don't keep power as an instructor. You want to give it away. And because of that, you need to be competent yet humble. You need to be humble about this and realize that success is measured by the success of that learner. Okay. So there you go. So if anybody has any questions or thoughts, we've got a few minutes, and you can just unmute your mic and fire away. I'll stick around for a few minutes. It's yeah, it's Friday, like, you know, at 1 o'clock here, so nobody's asking questions, so that's okay. But okay, well, hey, thank you all for being here, and I hope this provided you with a little bit of information, you know, about something to think about. Dallas, if you go one more, please. I think I have well, there you go. Stay safe, stay healthy, wear a mask, damn it, right? That's what I'm saying. And we'll get through this, and the next time that we see each other, you know, maybe it'll be in person. And so let's see. Hey, Pam, thank you very much. My friend Pam Arturi from California was on the call, and if you're Facebook friends with Pam, you know, something really incredible. So thank you for that. So we'll see you all. You know, have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, wear the mask, and have the best holiday you can possibly have. We're you know, we're going to get through it.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You know, Tammy, Dallas, can you answer that question about the recording?
Yeah, I will email it to everyone who registered. It takes about an hour to upload, but I'll email it once it's uploaded to YouTube.
Great, excellent. All right, well, y'all be good. We will see you down the road.